Welcome back. Video number 2 of chapter 5. Today is mostly going to be talking about the railroad. So, the way I look at it, Transcontinental Railroad getting America on track after the Civil War. So, there you go. There's my joke, my little pun. A student came up with that. I can't remember who it was, but there it is. Transcontinental Railroad getting America back on track. So anyways, the reason that they needed to have this Transcontinental Railroad, and we're kind of taking a step back and talking about the mid-1860s again, but in 1865, the U.S. had about 35,000 miles worth of railroad track, which, that's a lot, 35,000 miles. But one of the downfalls of it is almost all of those railroads are east of the Mississippi River. So if you're thinking about having a mental map in your mind right now, 35,000 miles, almost entirely all east of the Mississippi. Well, if you live west of that, that's going to be tough for you. It's going to be difficult to travel. So Lincoln is going to kind of counteract that. He counteracts it with signing what's called the Pacific Railway Act. So what this does, this is going to provide for the construction of a transcontinental railroad by 2 corporations. And one thing that they're going to do to kind of incentivize, to get companies involved, because really the government this time, they don't have a ton of cash. And if they're not going to have a lot of cash, they're not going to be able to pay for this railroad. They have to figure out a way to get corporations involved. So the Pacific Railroad Act is going to give out land. So land is going to be given as an incentive to the 2 companies that they say are going to be in charge of building this railroad, and they're going to build it quickly. So basically, the more you build, the quicker you get it done, the more land you get. So this really isn't necessarily handing out cash. Say you're going to build the railroad for $1 million. It's going to be, you're going to be given thousands upon thousands and teetering in the millions of acres. And once those companies have those acres, they can do whatever they want with it. They can sell it to a real estate company. They can farm or ranch it. It's going to be completely up to them. But just know that land, this is very important. Land is going to be given as an incentive to build quickly. So eventually they decide upon 2 companies. And they're going to start at opposite parts of the United States. And they're going to meet in Utah. So the first one is going to be the Union Pacific. So this company begins their railroad in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, this would probably not be a job that you would want to have. Work was very tough. It was, in a way, kind of dangerous. Definitely physically exhausting. Think about, you're working probably 12 to 14 hours a day in Nebraska, so you're going to have to deal with the heat in the summer. You're going to have to deal with the blizzards in the winter. Going through mountains. At this time, there were also attacks from the different Native American tribes. But the Union Pacific, they're going to start in Omaha, Nebraska. And again, even when you camped out, life was not going to be easy at night. The second one was going to be the Central Pacific. Now, this one begins in Sacramento, California. And the Central Pacific, really, they had trouble getting people to work for them. So they are going to bring workers over from Asia. More specifically, they're going to bring workers over from China to come and work this. And they would get paid a total of $1 per day. So again, not probably a job that you want to have. But, talking about the idea of the American dream, people were brought overseas. They were given free passage, got to the United States, and they were able to work on the railroad. So that's going to be kind of the early part of the Transcontinental Railroad. And I know I'm kind of talking about it quick here, but eventually work was done. So work was completed in only 4 years. And talking about just how physically tiring and physically exhausting this would be, each mile of the track required 400 rails. Each rail required 10 spikes. So think about that per mile, how difficult it was going to be. So eventually in 1869, they are going to meet in Utah, and we get this picture here, which is going to be in Utah, where it is finally going to be completed. Now, talking about the 2 separate companies, the Union Pacific beat the Central Pacific in the amount of how many miles they had built. The Union Pacific built about a little bit more than 1,000, and the Central Pacific was about 680, around there, which just meant that they got more land. And the last spike was going to be hammered by Leland Stanford, which isn't necessarily too important to remember his name. But the big thing is, after he hammers the last spike, or the golden spike as it's often referred to, the railroad is considered complete. And it's kind of weird in the sense that once it's complete, It's like a massive celebration. I mean, towns are having parades. In New York City, they're blasting off cannons to celebrate. In Philadelphia, they're ringing the Liberty Bell. But this was going to be important for business because they're now going to be able to get to each side of the country, and it's not going to take them necessarily too long to be able to do that. And the last one we're going to talk about for this video is going to be the Credit Mobilier scandal. Now, the railroad, building it, there was a lot of corruption. Now, sometimes they would say if you built this, you would get, say 20 miles, you would get X amount of land. Sometimes they would just say, depending on how much you build, we'll decide later how much land you're going to get. But Credit Mobilier is going to be probably one of the biggest aspects of corruption for the railroad. Now, this is going to become public in 1872. And just like today, a lot of these stories are going to be coming out from the newspaper, from the media. So the New York Sun, they are going to be the first to have this kind of journalism here where they're going to start to talk about different corruption. Now the scandal, the way that this worked, the Union Pacific, which we just talked about as one of the major corporations for building the railroad, the Union Pacific is going to be charged by Congress to go out and build more railroads from the Missouri, and they're trying to head out to the Pacific. Now, they essentially create a dummy company. So here's Union Pacific. They own this dummy company, the Credit Mobilier. Now, the Credit Mobilier, they said they would build the railroad, but they are going to do it at an inflated price. So say if it was only going to cost $1 million, they're going to sell it for 10 or 20 or possibly $30 million. Now you're probably thinking, why would they sign off on it? Well, they are going to say, we'll build it for $10 million. Union Pacific signs off on it. Union Pacific, they're the ones that make that $10 million. So investors, really, they sign contracts with themselves to overcharge. And eventually they overcharge and they become broke. They are just about to be bankrupt. And all of a sudden, here comes Congress to help them out. So the Union Pacific, which has members in Congress, which today would be very, very illegal. But the Union Pacific, they go to congressmen, and they sell them stocks far below market value. They are going to sell about $9 million worth of stocks. And the reason that they do this, congressmen, they now own the company. It's now going to go to Congress for everybody, not just the people who own the company, and they are going to ask for a bailout. So, say again, another $100 million. Well, Congress, they sign off on it. Congress approves it. And who does that help out? These congressmen here that just sold or just bought the stocks well below market value. Now, today, again, that is very illegal. You have congressmen, and not just, congressmen, you have people in the House, people in the Senate. We have the current vice president. Even James Garfield is a part of this. He was buying stocks, who goes on to become the president. But the railroad definitely was going to be corrupt, and this is just kind of one example of congressmen, of people setting up these dummy companies as a way to make millions of dollars.